My adopted brother kept accidentally finding our biological parents' old letters, until I realized he'd been searching for something specific in them the whole time. My brother Caleb was adopted into our family at 6, a few years before I was born. He rarely talked about his life before us, and our parents always said they'd let him bring it up when he was ready. He never did, so we never pushed him. About a year ago, while helping clean out our grandmother's attic after she moved into assisted living, Caleb started finding old boxes of letters belonging to our late grandfather, correspondence going back decades. He mentioned finding a few interesting ones. Nothing major, just old family history. It kept happening after that first day. Every time we sorted through more boxes, Caleb would casually mention finding another old letter, always reading through it quietly before setting it aside. I didn't think much of it until I noticed he was specifically gravitating toward one particular box, one nobody else had shown interest in, filled with correspondence from decades before Caleb was even born. One afternoon, I caught him rereading the same letter for the third time, clearly absorbed rather than just casually browsing. When I asked what he'd found, he quickly folded it and said it was nothing important. This continued over the following months. Every visit to the attic, he'd end up alone with that same box, taking longer than necessary, sometimes photographing pages on his phone instead of just reading them. I started wondering if he was searching for something specific rather than enjoying family history like the rest of us. I mentioned it to my mom, who admitted she'd noticed the same thing, but assumed he'd tell us eventually. Still, something about his quiet, focused searching felt too deliberate to be casual curiosity. One evening, I found him alone in the attic, long after everyone else had gone downstairs, surrounded by open letters, more emotional than I'd ever seen him. I sat down beside him, instead of asking directly, just staying present in case he wanted to talk. After a long silence, he finally opened up. Years ago, during a brief conversation with his biological mother before his adoption was finalized, she'd mentioned once, almost offhandedly, that Caleb had an older half-sibling somewhere, a detail nobody had ever followed up on. He'd carried that single sentence for over 20 years, never having real information to search with. When he found our grandfather's old letters, one happened to mention a name matching a detail his biological mother had once said, a small thread he'd been quietly pulling on ever since, terrified of getting his hopes up over what might just be coincidence. I sat with him as he explained everything, finally understanding all those months of quiet searching. He wasn't hiding anything scandalous or chasing money. He was trying to find a sibling he'd wondered about for over 2 decades, alone, never feeling it was his place to make it the family's problem too. We brought it to our parents together that same week. Instead of him carrying it alone, our whole family got involved, researching records, reaching out to a genealogy service, following every thread from those letters properly, instead of piecing it together secretly in an attic. It took 4 more months, but we eventually found her, a woman living 2 states away, who had in fact been searching for a brother given up for adoption decades earlier, never quite sure if he even wanted to be found. Caleb met her for the first time last month. I watched my brother, who'd spent over 20 years quietly holding onto a single sentence from a conversation he barely remembered, finally sit across from the person that sentence had always been about. Some searches take decades to make sense of. His just happened to start in an attic full of letters nobody else thought to read closely enough.